Moses revealed the name of God. He was called upon from on high to free his people, all of us, from the bondage to mortal concept. He was assured that all form of mental and physical power would be subject unto him in the name of God. When he asked the divine its name, the answer came back, I am that I am. There is no God outside individual man and woman. They are the embodiment of God. The source of all spiritual revelation comes from the eye of individual being. So what did Moses reveal? He was raised as a prince of Egypt. He was educated in the mystery schools. But he was an orphan. Nobody knew where he came from. Nobody knew who his people were. He appeared floating down the Nile and was taken in by a princess. And when he grew up and saw the brutality of slavery, the oppression of the Hebrew people, he saw more than physical bondage. He saw that the mental control over his people was actually the universal belief in a material power that enslaved humanity to the manipulation of the carnal mind, giving those schooled in that form of manipulation control over a whole race of people. And that wasn't right. Nobody that understands mysticism is a slave. Nobody who understands their spiritual reality can be captive to anyone, whether it is in a prison, whether they are slaves to a culture, or whether they are slaves to their own individual beliefs. Moses, in his anger, killed a man and fled Egypt. He wandered in the wilderness, that state of consciousness where he had time to contemplate and to think and purge his mind of material conditioning. And he was called. He was called upon to set his people free. He went up to the divine mountain, up to that place in consciousness where illumination exists, where the answers to the nature of reality were, where the revelation about the material world and the spiritual were, and he confronted a burning bush that did not consume itself. That symbol itself shows that material concept of existence is not real. When the spiritual nature of life is fully understood, we see through the appearances of destruction and disease, of consumption through fire, consumption through material belief and concept, to the reality that the manifestation of the divine can never be altered, can never be destroyed. It is eternal, untouchable. With that understanding, Moses went back into the realm of material power. But he was protected by his experience of oneness, his experience of the I. He was safe in the realization that individual life is divine. No outside assault on it has power. It is not necessary to protect oneself from the material world because your protection is in knowing that the I of your being is one with all humanity. He received the guidance of God. He surrendered his personal sense of life to the divine. He became an avenue, a mouthpiece of the Spirit, so that in his humility, he could confront every appearance without reaction. He developed the ability to be detached and to listen to the I within. Then, when every form of illusion was presented to him by material concept, by the belief in material power, he watched the Spirit of God dissolve it. It led them out of captivity and into the wilderness. His nullifying of material power set his people free. He stripped them of everything they could use to create power. They were in the great void, weaned of every material influence that could create another concept of power, another image to worship. And the people did not like that. Moses had to rely on the I within to supply the needs of his people. It appeared as manna that fell from heaven. It appeared as water that came out of the desert stone. He brought his people, that state of consciousness struggling to perceive the nature of spiritual existence, to the border of the promised land. But they were not ready to enter that consciousness. They needed guidance. They needed law. The beliefs and superstitions from their bondage prevented them from entering the kingdom. Their proclivity to prey upon one another was too base. They would denigrate back into the warring tribes and be enslaved again. Without a way to experience the oneness of the I, personal behavior would go back to believing that it is only me. It is all about me. It is that personal sense of me that is really the greatest sin, rather than realizing that there is only one cause, one activity, one presence. Moses came back from the mountaintop, that high consciousness, with a set of laws. The first of those laws were about the nature of the divine, that there is no other God but I, that you cannot make an image of I, that you will not profane the I by personalizing it. To fulfill those laws, one had to be untouched by material belief. Moses saw that that was not the case, so he gave a set of social laws to help raise the consciousness of the unillumined. These laws made society work. They had people respecting one another, not killing each other, not stealing from each other, not taking each other's partner. They taught respect and love, loving your neighbor as yourself, which became the great law of the last mystic in our series. Moses realized that union with God came only when the individual was receptive and willing for it to happen. He built a temple to give the people a pathway to enlightenment, a guide to the nature of spiritual reality. One God, one presence, no other power except that I that is within yourself. He gave them a pathway to see the divine everywhere and in everything, as the substance and source of all life. To participate in the temple, he created a ritual for the individual to divest themselves of their attachments to this world, so that they could enter that receptive state of consciousness and experience the divine. To pray aright, a person had to be cleansed of the concepts and the dirt of this world. Then they had to relinquish, to burn in a brazier, all their resentments, all of their judgments, all of their human opinions about right and wrong, good and evil. Let them go. Burn them up. Now they were in a state where they could enter into the inner reaches of the temple. They were still not allowed into the Holy of Holies because they could not enter that consciousness as a human being. Before they could enter that space, they had to realize that none of the good or evil of this world was generated by that which was the creator and maintainer of life in all of its infinite form. The rewarding and punishing God of this world was no God at all. That belief was cleansed and purged, and the person entering the inner temple then is receptive to the divine. In the inner temple, a person is reminded of the voice of God, the horn that whispered and said, I am that I am. They were reminded of the bread, of the manna that fed them in the desert when there was no means of support. And they are reminded of the essential law that, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That oneness, that experience of oneness, is our ultimate freedom. It releases us from the bondage to material sense.